Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is sponsored by
JK and Chuck a Brick. They wanted to say that you should go check out a local hockey game. It's fun. You'll like it. And don't be such a bigot about sports unless you are too busy volunteering at an animal rescue or smashing capitalism, in which case, keep that shit up. They also said, check out a game some other time. You've got shit to do. Also, how about talking about the other podcasts on the collective now and again? I mean, holy shit. They plug you folks often, but you rarely reciprocate. In the words of R. Lee Ermey, as written by Gustav Hasford, you look like the kind of guy that would fuck a person in the ass and not even have the goddamn common courtesy to give them a reach around. But in all seriousness, we love the show and Jordan. We also appreciate Jeremy. Not quite love yet, mainly because we haven't hung out. Let's fix that. Fuck shit, damn.
You know, we don't plug the other shows in the collective enough, but we also need more people in the collective. So check out all the other shows in the collective, whichsidecollective.org. And if you're interested in creating your own show, drop us a line. We'll do what we can to help you, whether that's a part of the collective or not.
And if you'd like to sponsor a show, you can do so by donating at least $10. That's about how much it costs us to make each episode. So that's all that we ask from you. You can find out about that at whichsidepodcast.com.
This is episode 108.
Yeah, we talked to Priya from Direct Action Everywhere.
You should look them up and see if there's any actions going around in your area, see what you can do to help them out.
There is one coming up soon, so she talks about that, so check that out.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a really big National Day of Action, so look it up, see what's going on in your area, and help out if you can. What news and events do we have going on this week, Jordan?
Well, besides that event, there's probably a lot going on. Just folks haven't contacted us about it, so I'm just asking people to ride a prisoner.
You can never go wrong with riding a prisoner.
And if you do choose to ride a prisoner, let us know, and we'll hook you up with a month membership for every prisoner you ride.
What?
We're just that nice.
December 1st, 1937. Get this, Jordan. That's when pot became illegal in the United States.
December 1st of what year?
1937.
Well, dang.
It's about time that's fucking changed.
It's coming.
It needs to come. And this is coming from somebody who has never smoked pot, never ingested it, never has any intention of doing it, but you all should be free as fuck to do it if you want to.
Yeah, man.
If you like these little tidbits every week, I pull them out of the Slingshot Personal Organizer. Right now is the best time to get it because they go for a calendar year. And you can keep track of all this shit that you need to keep track of and get all this interesting information. You can get them at a local info shop. If you don't have a local info shop, you can get one at an online info shop like AK Press. I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
I'm Jeremy. I hope you can tell us apart.
Hi, Jeremy.
And I'm Jordan.
Hi, Jordan.
And how do you pronounce your name, just so I don't make an ass of myself and say it wrong?
My name is pronounced Priya
Okay.
Sawhney.
Priya Sawhney?
Sawhney.
Sawhney,
Yes.
excuse me, sorry.
Yes.
Priya Sawhney.
No problem.
Okay. I will remember that from now until eternity.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
So
Jeremy, what's your last name? Is it sorry, I think I'm just trying to remember. Is it start with a B?
Parkin.
Okay, great. Because I know I met one Jeremy when I went to Salt Lake City, and there's another Jeremy who works at Ching Sanctuary. So
There's quite a few. Yeah,
there's quite a few.
Yeah, it's a popular name.
Awesome, great.
So you were saying you just got back from tour. How was that?
Yeah, it's actually been a while, but the recovery from after the tour has been longer. But the tour, the DXC Southwest tour, was absolutely incredible. It was not only a personal growing experience, but we, really managed to accomplish a lot of the goals that we set out for ourselves. One of them being meeting new people and mobilizing activists in different cities, including Salt Lake City and Las Vegas, which, is kind of our surprise cities. When you mention to people, oh, we have activists in Salt Lake City and Las Vegas, people sort of look at you like, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City? It's for some reason, it's just not heard of. So, but yeah, the tour was absolutely incredible.
So when did you go to Las Vegas? Was that before or after Salt Lake?
It was before. It was the, wait, let me think. Yeah, Salt Lake City was the last stop, and Las Vegas was the stop before Salt Lake City.
So what was the whole focus of the tour?
So the focus of the tour, the focus of the tour was basically to go to cities in the Southwest, and we wanted to, myself and a few other organizers with DXC, Lola Kay, who organizes in Los Angeles, Missy Freeland and Nicholas Shaw, who organize in Riverside. We really wanted to mobilize activists in other cities, and especially strengthen activists in the Southern California scene. There's a lot of people doing great things, but we wanted to sort of be the collaborating force, trying to bring all of the activists together and really to talk about DXC and why we do nonviolent direct action, and the importance of speaking out honestly with a message of anti-speciesism and animal liberation, and getting people to do actions with us.
So what would be the main focuses of direct actions everywhere? Would it be like focusing on, speciesism in general, the food industry? Are you focusing on like furriers? Like what's your general main focus?
Yeah. So DXC, Direct Action Everywhere's main focus is to take nonviolent direct action to address and change speciesism in society, and to really, do it with, as I said, the approach of nonviolent direct action.
And what are some examples of the direct action that you guys are doing?
So in the last year, the focus of DXC has been our campaign, It's Not Food, It's Violence, you may have heard of. Mm-hmm. And, just this campaign, It's Not Food, It's Violence, we really seek to really emphasize that animals are not food, they're not objects, and eating their bodies is violence. And many of organizations in the animal rights movement, we've long focused on traditional methods like vegan outreach and really being, asking people politely to consider animals. But we really took a different approach, and are taking a different approach by entering places of violence where animals are being exploited, where their bodies are being sold as meat, where people are eating their bodies, and demand that people pay attention to this atrocity. And so, that's just one of the examples. And so when we were on tour, and, we have monthly days of action every month where activists from all different cities disrupt places of violence and do similar actions everywhere.
Do you kind of take the approach of, the aspect of witnessing the violence? Is that kind of the approach that the DXC takes? Like the bearing witness of kind of thing?
Yeah. And I know that Toronto Pig Save really focuses on bearing witness, and they really emphasize the importance of doing so. And I think there's definitely an emphasis and value of bearing witness. And, although we haven't done that traditionally as Toronto Pig Save, I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about, but
yeah.
But yeah, so they actually go to slaughterhouses and they're right there in front of these animals who are about to be killed. And I think there's so much value, and I respect Anita Cryogenic and all the other folks from Toronto Pig Save in doing that. And I mean, I would like to say that we're not bearing witness in the same way, because when we go inside of these places, obviously these animals are already dead. So I think the emphasis of these actions is different in that we're there to redefine otherwise normalized institutions of violence, where people are used to looking at the dead bodies of animals as just being meat, and redefining and saying, you know what, this is not just a piece of meat. This is not an object. This used to be a living, breathing animal. So, but hopefully in the future we will, we will try to bear witness, because I really do respect and see the importance of that, as well as other people in our group.
You know, talking to Anita was the first time we talked to her a couple weeks ago. It was the first time that I was really that aspect of activism was really brought to me, and I never really thought about it before. It's actually a relatively new tactic that I'm aware of. So for me, at least, so I'm not too familiar with it, honestly.
Yeah.
But what is your origin? Like, what brought you to veganism and animal rights?
Yeah, so I actually am an immigrant from India. I grew up in Punjab, India, northern India, and I lived there for 12 years. And my parents and I immigrated to the United States when I was 12 years old. And growing up in India, I've seen a lot of poverty, and I especially had a heart for animals who cows and dogs, a lot of stray animals. I saw growing up suffering, and I always knew in my heart that this is something that I needed to do something about. And so basically, I think even though I became a vegan not too long ago, I've always had anti-speciesist values and a strong will to fight for animal liberation without knowing it. To my fortune, I came across activists who are now my co-organizers with Direct Action Everywhere. And I was connected to, I was plugged into this organization very, very spontaneously. But the moment that I found Direct Action Everywhere, I realized my potential as an activist. So my origin, just sum it up, was basically growing up and always having this idea, or always, as you said, like bearing witness to these animals as a child, and just realizing that it is going to be my duty. I always perceived it as my duty to do something about animal suffering when I saw something that was clearly wrong.
I have some good friends who organize the Pune Youth Foundation, and we're actually currently helping them change to a vegan lifestyle in India. It's really interesting, the cultural differences of the acceptance there. But yeah, they have a sister collective podcast that we help them produce also.
What is this group called?
The Pune Youth Foundation.
Oh, Pune. Okay.
Yeah, and then they have a separate podcast that they. So far, I've only done one episode. It's called Soka, on focusing on the history of Indian revolutionary thought.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. I would like to find out more about that organization.
Yeah, they just finished. They planted a mango grove for an orphanage. That was like their first major action that they did. Yeah.
Yeah, India has a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of history in India of activism and nonviolent direct action, and we also have activists in India who are taking action. When it comes to veganism, of course, the culture is so different. Mm-hmm. But as far as like having sentience and respect for animals, that's all. That also, I should add, was a big part growing up, because culturally and traditionally there is undertone of it's anti-speciesist undertones in in like religion and other aspects of our culture.
How is your family with you becoming vegan and an activist?
My family's supportive. I would say that, my mom especially has been an absolute inspiration for me, because if it wasn't for her, I really don't think, I would have had these values and ideas of, these values for helping animals, because she really was the one to teach myself and my siblings the importance of helping. And both my parents have always been very giving people, and still are, and really, really focus on helping others. But besides, obviously, some of my family members still eat animals, which is really, really hurtful. I do think that will change soon. But as far as like being supportive of my activism, they're absolutely supportive.
I was gonna say, like, that's always been something really, really hard for me. So being vegan for so long, and then all my family members obviously know why I'm vegan, why I've been vegan, but so few are vegan, and it's always been like one of the biggest struggles for myself. So if you have any tips on how I can make them be vegan, let me know. But the last 20 years they haven't changed their mind.
Yeah, I think you and I are not the only ones who share this story. So many people in our movement have to face this, whether it's our family members or our friends or people at work. And yes, I do have some advice. I mean, I have definitely felt really depressed and sad, having to think about family members and friends eating animals, and going to work where people are joking about you not eating animals and making fun of you. And really all that changed once I realized the importance of not focusing on veganism as much as animal liberation. So I think my advice would be to cultivate people's anti-speciesist values and talk to them about the importance of animal liberation and justice, and frame the issue in that way, as opposed to focusing on that, changing their food choices and changing their lifestyles. Because I think it's a lot harder for people to argue eating the body of a tortured animal, and a lot harder for them to argue an issue when you frame it as a social justice issue, but a lot easier for them to argue when you're saying, like, why are you making this personal choice of eating this specific food? And that really goes hand in hand with what DXE is trying to do, which is redefine eating animals and any sort of speciesist industry or action, and talk about it in a frame of violence. And the second tip is, people change not as much as we think because of individual desires, but because of communities. So what we need to do is create strong communities of activists. For example, I know that my parents and most of my family members really do have anti-speciesist values. If you talk to them, they care about animals, they love animals. However, some of them still eat animals. And I think, perceiving that in a more constructive way. I don't see them as people who are bad. I just see that they're doing something that's bad because our society and culture tells us that it's okay to eat animals. It's okay to, it's okay to eat animals and consume their bodies. So what we really need to focus on is building a community and creating social change, which will eventually change society's perception and collective sentiments of eating animals. And also and speciesism at large.
So what's the general animal rights community? How have they perceived DXE so far?
I think that let's see, this is an interesting question. Let me think about that for a second. I think within the last year we have had a lot of support from many different groups. I think we've also obviously had a lot of criticism, but that's natural, especially when you are a new organization and you're doing something different. So you have to expect people to scrutinize your actions and to criticize it. But, one of the things that we at DXE really focus on is constructive criticism. If people give us feedback, if other groups give us feedback, we always invite it. And we really focus on working together and collaborating. Even if there are major differences in the way we approach activism, we still try to focus on points of intersection, and how we can work together, because we strongly believe that it's the collaboration and unity within the animal rights movement which is going to eventually help us achieve animal liberation. So yes, there are a lot of groups and even individual activists who simply do not agree with the nonviolent direct action approach, and don't want to participate. But as I said, within DXE's larger network, there's so much more beyond just like going inside of these places of violence and doing inside disruptions. The more important part is how we can be a part of this network, regardless of the approach we agree or disagree on.
Well, you mentioned like that you've had some criticism from animal rights organizations. What specific criticisms have they've really brought forward?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, a lot of individuals and groups are not very comfortable with the idea of nonviolent direct action, and truly believe, and for their own reasons, that we ought to be nice, and we have to we have to give people information, and we have to educate people, as opposed to taking a more assertive, direct stance. So those have been, that's been just part of the debate. But there's also, there's been more. But with that said, I also think we've made good steps, good faith efforts on all different sides to actually look past those sort of disagreements and approach tactics and actually try to work together.
Do you ever get the criticism of the opposite of, maybe the point of nonviolence is being too limiting?
Can you ask that again?
Like you said that, a lot of the criticism is saying that you guys go too far and you want to be more nice. Well, do you ever get just the opposite, saying, well, you're not going far enough, and maybe, that your point of nonviolence is too limiting for your actions?
Yeah, I will say that there have been let me think about that. I think that there's groups who perceive the definition of direct action as different than DXE does, and I think that might partially kind of be relevant to what you're asking. That people think, direct action is actually physically going inside and for example, like going to, actually directly doing something with animals. So, which is, we are doing that. DXE, we do that. But I think the difference is that when we go inside of these places, like, for example, when we're inside of Chipotle and we're talking about these animals who are being eaten, we are taking direct action. People perceive it differently because, as I said, the animal rights movement and culture doesn't recognize these actions as being like direct, because we're just so ingrained in thinking that, going inside of like a seemingly innocent place is doing something direct. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I totally get that. So you mentioned like when you do actions inside of like a Chipotle, what are the reactions of the patrons of said places while you're doing these demonstrations?
They vary. The reactions definitely vary. Of course, we have had a significant amount of, obviously, people who are angry, who are reactive, and for the most part, very, very reject the message that we're trying to get across, very assertively and react, in a very negative manner. And of course, that leads to the question, well, why are you then doing these actions? And the one thing that we really, really emphasized on tour was really to tell people that the reason that we disrupt, the reason that DXE goes inside, the reason that we take this approach is really not to change the minds of patrons who are eating inside of these restaurants, or really not to change the minds of people who are shopping inside of, say, a fur store or any other place of violence. The reason that we do these actions is to inspire the small percentage of people who already are aligned with our values. So in other words, we're not trying to create vegans, we're trying to create activists. And so that's one of the misconceptions, that people perceive DXC's actions as, the people inside of the restaurant aren't going to go home and become vegan just because you went inside and with an "It's not food, it's violence" placard and told people that they're doing something wrong. And you're absolutely right. Most people will not do that because, as I said, changing people's behaviors has so much more to do with changing society's collective understanding of speciesism. But what DXC is seeking to do is to inspire activists by sharing these actions on social media. And within the last year, we really have succeeded in doing that.
So I imagine cops have probably been called at some point.
Yeah.
How do you deal with like the issue of police or the situation escalating? What typically happens at that point?
Yeah, actually, this is a great question. We've been asked that many times, and we really also got this question a lot while we were on tour. And the first thing that I really like to say is that we're not doing anything wrong. When we go inside of these places, we're really essentially just making a collective, more dramatic customer complaint. And obviously, there is a certain intensity to these actions because it is breaking the social norms and barriers, and that makes it seem more intense because people are so not used to seeing these sort of actions inside of, you're just inside of a grocery store shopping, and to look and see these people coming in with placards and saying "It's not food, it's violence," and sharing speak outs and really touching stories about animals with images of animals. And, for example, on tour on our last day of action, we were actually doing a memorial service for the animals in front of meat counters at several different grocery stores. And so, yes, and of course, there are times when police is called. But what people, I think, might not understand as well until you do the actions is that, firstly, these actions are not that long. So by the time employees get a chance to call the police, we're actually basically finished with our action. But even when police are called, they can't do much. And once they ask us to leave, so far we've done hundreds of these actions and we've left and nobody has been arrested.
Do customers or employees ever get physical or aggressive or verbal?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can always expect that kind of response. And we have definitely gotten that type of response. And the one thing that we make clear to activists who are doing actions with DXC, and one thing we all really try to keep in mind, is that we are not there to change people's mind. We are not inside of any place of violence. We're disrupting to really change the people's minds right there. So we're not interacting with them. We're not there to have a conversation. We're there to deliver our message and to leave. And in the event that somebody does, physically attack someone, there are designated activists and organizers who are, who will intrude and obviously stop that. And but as far as verbal attacks go, we simply ask people to ignore those reactions and not engage with people because, again, we were there to deliver the message of animals and leave.
That's really interesting to me because I've been a part of a number of sit-ins, a number of civil disobedience actions, and usually the goal is stopping a business from doing something very specific, so like a furrier. So you'll do a sit-in, as a protest, and maybe close down the business for a couple of hours while you lock yourself down, or you hold your sit-in and then you end up being taken away by police or being arrested, or you're at doing a sit-in, let's say like at a circus, but your message is to actually educate those people right at the spot to not, partake in that circus. So it seems interesting to me that the goal is just something I've never thought about. The goal isn't immediate change. The goal is more top level, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think, we can describe it in that way. The term we like to use is a spillover effect. Uh-huh. So the spillover effect is basically the secondary effect an action has. The primary effect of an action would be obviously to change to have immediate change after you do something. And that example of that would be, I go inside of a place of violence. I say, these bodies that you're eating, that, it's not okay for you to do this, and we're going to stop this, and the business shuts down. That's a primary effect. And somebody says, you know what, I'm going to go vegan. That's a primary effect. But to be honest, that sort of an effect is not only it's very unlikely, but it's also just not realistic. It's not effective. So that's why we focus on the spillover effect. And the spillover effect is really when, I'm not sure if you knew about DXC's mini campaign, Disrupt Speciesism, but it really started when my co-organizer and myself did disruptions inside of these two places of these two restaurants, and asked other people to also take the Disrupt Speciesism challenge. And obviously, when we were both inside of that restaurant and did those actions, we got negative responses. I mean, the waiter gave me the middle finger and told me to leave, and customers booed and yelled at us. And obviously, nobody really changed. Maybe they went home and thought about it, but really there was no way for me to tell, or my co-organizer Kelly to tell. But what happened in the next few weeks really surprised us. Both Kelly and myself went home and uploaded our videos on Facebook. And when we woke up the next morning, what we saw was within the next few weeks was an amazing, overwhelming amount of response. So many people sharing videos. But not only that, so many people doing similar actions all across the world. And that's a really, really great example of a spillover effect. We might not have shut down the business that we were disrupting. We might not have changed anybody's mind inside of that place, but we certainly inspired other activists to do similar actions.
So, speaking of Kelly, is that Kelly Atlas?
That's Kelly Atlas, yes. So
recently she released a video about snow, and that got national coverage so far, Glenn Beck and all sorts of other things. Did you see a lot of increase in... Oh, Jeremy said he's not familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with this, unfortunately.
Did you want to explain that a little bit?
Sure, yes. So basically for our, as I said, DXC has monthly days of action, and our day of action for, it was called Disrupt Speciesism, and so all of us, we all had different individual actions that we were doing. And Kelly's happened to be the first action that she did. And she did it inside of a place. And she shared a very, very emotional and sad story about her quote unquote little girl, Snow, who she adopted. And, she uploaded on Facebook, and she got thousands of shares and an overwhelming response. And Glenn Beck on a radio show, and his website, The Blaze, they also covered it along with 60 other media outlets. And so I think your question, Jordan, was that you asking, Jordan?
Yeah, that was me.
So you asked whether we got a response, or we see more of a... I'm not sure. Did you say whether we got...
Yeah,
okay.
if you've seen a response from that, more people getting involved or doing similar actions because of that.
Well, first of all, yes, we definitely saw an overwhelming amount of response, not only from the animal rights community, but far above and beyond the animal rights community. For example, when I went on tour, so many people knew about Kelly, and because of her action, so many people knew about direct action everywhere and the things we were doing. And usually, we've coordinated days of action, and we reach out to people asking them to get involved. During that episode, we definitely had more people asking to join DXC, and there definitely has been a spillover effect of people wanting to join in more because the power of reaching mainstream is that there is people who become inspired to do the same. So I would say yes.
And also, it's really good that the video is just being shared so much that your message is definitely spreading that way.
So was Glenn Beck take on a positive take?
No, absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted I was confused by that because I'm I couldn't imagine an asshole like him taking a positive take on it.
Right. So absolutely not. It was not positive. But as you know, as we said when we shared his response, when Glenn Beck thinks your group is quote unquote, outrageous or ridiculous, you're doing something right, because it's Glenn Beck. And
he's outrageous and ridiculous.
Yeah, interestingly enough, he obviously made fun of Kelly. He made fun of her little girl Snow and talked about eating animals. But interestingly enough, even as much of controversial and like you said, asshole figure Glenn Beck is, even he said that I don't eat veal because I just find it to be cruel. And if somebody like Glenn Beck on the right wing can make a comment against animal cruelty, it really makes us question, like, well, if this is what Glenn Beck is thinking, then what about the left? People really ought to get on board with animal liberation.
I have found in for the moderate left, it seems like they're very timid to get involved with a lot of animal issues, because I think just like the left, I should say the moderate left in of itself, I think is also very timid to get involved in hardcore environmental issues at the same time. I've never understood it, honestly. I mean, I would say most people would classify me so far left that I'm probably right in being an anarchist, but I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right in that the left is definitely reluctant and, and hesitant in getting involved with animal rights. And honestly, the reason that is because for so long, the animal rights movement, quite frankly, has been perceived as being a vegan movement. And the focus has been on veganism instead of animal liberation. And in addition to that, the animal rights movement has been kind of perceived as country club activism. And so, of course, the left doesn't take us seriously because they perceive this movement to be basically white only, upper middle class women talking about the importance of getting together and having vegan potlucks. And that is exactly why we really need to focus more on emphasizing the importance of anti-speciesism and of animal liberation as opposed to veganism and consumer choices. And there's a really wonderful article by let's see, hold on, I'll actually get it to you in a second, but it's about this exact issue of why the left doesn't get involved. And a lot of it has to do with this conception and perception that animal rights activists is basically not a diverse movement, and people on the left just kind of want to stay away from that.
I think we've actually talked to somebody about this before.
Well, we had the whole discussion on veganism as the moral baseline, and I don't know if that's what you're saying. Like, I was going to ask that, so I'm a little maybe a little confused on that. I mean, do you think veganism is the moral baseline? Like, if you want to, adopt a complete, animal liberation stance, that at minimum you should be vegan.
Absolutely. I mean, of course. Well, let me answer that question in two different ways. I think, of course, we definitely value the importance of not eating animals and not consuming animals. But I don't think that's the centerpiece of the animal rights movement, or that it should be the focus of the animal rights movement. Okay. Because when you talk about, and I'm not, I should make that more clear. Veganism is important. It's important to address the issue of not eating animals and but the focus of veganism tends to be consumer choices, and the focus of veganism tends to, when you think about veganism, there's just these ideas that come in your mind, and the way that you tend to act upon those ideas is by for example, like boycotting different companies, and the focus is more like on not doing something as opposed to taking action. And I think when we frame the issue of animal rights as a social justice issue, when talking about it as animal liberation as opposed to veganism, it creates, it's much more stronger. And when you talk about veganism, people definitely, tend to focus more on dietary choices and changing people's individual behaviors. And as I said earlier, if we really want to change society, we have to take a stance that is much more honest and much more assertive and direct than just asking people to change their consumer choices and dietary choices. But absolutely, it's really important to focus on the fact that it is important to not eat animals. I think we're just saying it in two different ways. Some people call it veganism. I say changing the idea that animals are even food in the first place.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that brings to mind this is something that I've been talking about with several activists lately, and I think was brought up on the show previously, where in the 90s, going through the early 90s to mid 90s, the main focus of the animal rights movement in the United States was focused on fur and vivisection.
Yep.
And then farm came around in the late 90s to the early 2000s and refocused on veganism as a dietary choice. And a lot of the other major ones followed suit, like PETA followed suit, and I think Mercy and LCA followed suit.
Yeah.
And so we saw a change going in from the early 2000s to focus on dietary. Do you think that now the pendulum is kind of swinging back to get away from the focus on dietary?
I hope. Well, let's see. Can you ask the last part of your question again?
Like, I'm this is a personal hope of myself, at least. Like, I kind of hope that the scene has kind of hit its point, the furthest point on focusing on dietary and kind of swinging back and focusing towards the more broader issue of animal exploitation in general.
Yeah, I would absolutely like to think so. And I think, I'm not sure if I can speak for the whole movement at large, but I definitely know to the extent that DXE is having an impact, that is the impact that we're seeking to make, which is to refocus the emphasis of animal rights movement from dietary choices to action. We ought to take action and create long-lasting social change beyond just the horizons of veganism and dietary choices. So I would like to say yes. And if, even if I'm not sure, I sure hope that we're moving in that direction. And my inkling is that we are. So
when you say take action, so you're talking to a couple of longtime activists. Most of our listeners are pretty longtime activists. What does that mean to them? Like how can they take that message away from DXE? What do you want to see them doing or focusing on more?
That's a really, really great question. And the way that I'm going to answer that, when I talk about taking action, obviously I'm talking about nonviolent direct action and the importance of going out in the public and having a strong message for animal liberation. And on our tour, what we talked about was the importance of changing ideas and how important mental models are in changing society's view of animals and animal rights. And so when I'm talking about taking action, I'm talking about, becoming a part of a larger social network for animal rights and uniting forces in demanding society to acknowledge and acknowledge the way we treat animals, the way we conceive animals, the way we consume animals, the way we perceive animals, and stop it, and create a world where every animal is safe, happy, and free. And I mean, if people are listening to this, we want people to get involved in DXE's network. We want to collaborate with activist groups in every city, in every state, in every country, to not only become a part of DXE's network, just to become a part of our network, but really to become a part of a larger animal rights network where we're all working together to show the world that there are people everywhere who are taking action and taking action and speaking out against violence.
Is state oppression of activists something that DXE talks amongst themselves or plans for or teaches for?
State oppression of activists. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Where like FBI will infiltrate activist groups with the sole intent of disrupting their actions.
So DXE is an above ground group.
Well, I mean, it's pretty well known that they do this to lots of above ground groups. That's what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're asking whether we inform people about the about what you're talking about, about infiltration, yeah, we definitely talk about it, but we also really focus on how we should be transparent, honest, and everything that we're doing should be open, and how we can avoid those situations.
So, from DXC standpoint, how do you avoid those situations?
By creating a culture and community which is, like I said, transparent, being open, and having clear communication. We really focus on the importance of, not only not keeping secrets, but being transparent, encouraging community members to talk about conflict within each other and to resolve conflict in a very community focused way. So, for example, within DXC, we have a conflict resolution policy, and we try to emphasize and focus the importance of reaching out to people and creating like a culture of communication and being constructive with each other. Because from my understanding, and I mean, I'm sorry, I do have a limited understanding of this. Of course, other people in our group, I think, can talk more to this much more broadly and better than I can. But from my understanding, I feel like, infiltrators and these sort of situations really escalate in groups where there are secrets and people that they're, and we really try to stay away from that. We try to keep an open culture and an open communication and create a group and community with better values. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of, maybe I'm just being a little confused, or it's just a little different than what I'm used to, because I'm more used to a very strong security culture standpoint of keeping to keep activists safe, where it sounds like you guys are taking the exact opposite approach of that.
When you say you're used to a different approach, can you describe that approach?
Well, Jordan, would you want to go into in depth on
security culture? Basically, is an understanding that I don't know when you talk about things, just be smart about how you're
when you're saying being transparent and open. Most security culture, to my understanding, would be
opposite.
It's just the opposite. I don't want to know, and I shouldn't want to know, and neither should you want to know. You shouldn't be asking these questions because the open communication.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, yeah.
So I just didn't know if I was misunderstanding or yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was talking about being open, I'm just saying we should all be open amongst each other about about any sort of conflict. But of course, if there are people who are engaging in sort of illegal activities, we definitely make it clear to people we don't want to talk about this. And this is something that, I mean, the first thing that I say, even I said to you, is that DXE is an above ground group, and everything that we do is above ground. And yes, so I think we do agree on that sort of in what you said, and the importance of having a security culture where we don't do that, and we're not, and we shouldn't be having these conversations that are really putting everybody else at risk.
One of the scary things about me is every organization I've been a part of, obviously all above ground, they're always the very first ones that are targeted by state oppression. They're the ones that come in. Jordan has been arrested by the FBI. I've been arrested by the FBI. We both have faced it. Jordan spent 10 months in prison due to state oppression. It's always a scary prospect for a lot of activists to have to face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jordan's just nodding. Yes.
Yeah, it is. But from what it sounds like, DXE seems to be a sort of evolving sort of movement. Do you see yourself progressing towards anything? Do you have any ideas for what the next campaigns might be?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that our next day of action is December 7th. And during this day of action, we are actually going to be revealing the new target of our campaign. And we're also shifting our campaign to have a much larger focus on anti-speciesism. And, the name of the campaign is going to be Until Every Animal is Free. And so definitely we definitely have a lot of things, a lot of plans in the next few weeks about really evolving in a sense that there's going to be much more focus on anti-speciesism and the importance of animal liberation and what that really means.
How does DXE plan on handling things like burnout and support? Because it seems to me like anytime you take a large view on anything that's very hard to win or is going to take a very long time to win, like the fight against speciesism, it can get very discouraging at certain points.
That's a really, really good question. And I know I've said this several times, but I really, really cannot emphasize enough the importance of creating a community and a strong, not only just a community, but a strong community with shared values and people supporting each other. And these communities, not only just local communities, but global communities. So if there are people who, for example, face issues within our network, we really want to know. And that's what I meant earlier when I talked about open communication. We want to know how we can support you. And locally, we actually just are starting to implement what we're calling is a program where activists within our network are going to be going out of their way to reach out to other activists, because there are things like burnout and depression and loneliness within the animal rights movement especially, and we really want to focus on creating a positive culture. So having a community of animal rights activists who support one another and share the same values and take collective action, and that is the most important thing. Community building within movement building is the most important thing. So I would say having a strong community of activists who support one another.
So how do you personally handle that? Like you just said, you got off this long tour. Obviously, there's lots of stresses when you do those things, and you said you had like a long decompression period. Like, how do you personally handle that decompression and that self-organization to get yourself back to where you need to be in a good physical and mental state?
I mean, I have to say the tour, besides obviously being a lot of action, was really, really fun because I got to build bonds. I got to create bonds with organizers who don't live next to me, who are now some of my best friends. Missy Freeland, Nicholas Shaw in Riverside, and Lola Kay, who organize in Los Angeles. These are really close friends. And every time we had disagreements or a bad day, like I talked to them, they were right there. And having that sort of, bond is so important. And when I came back, one of my co-organizers, Wayne Chung, he always, we work together a lot. And he said one thing to me, which always sticks out to me. And that is that leadership is nothing more than being persistent. And last year, I remember talking to Wayne about how we don't have activists and how people aren't really, not even willing to leaflet. Like, we reached out to people asking them like, hey, can you do an action? And so many people just wouldn't. It just didn't happen. And that was really discouraging when you are dealing with big issues like how to change society and speciesism. It's really hard. And I remember being so discouraged. But I remember what he said, which is leadership is nothing more than being persistent. And now some of the same people who were not willing to become involved in the first place are really, really involved in our network, shows me that we are doing something. So when I look at all of the growth and achievements we've had in the past, it's really motivating. And having the support of my co-organizers, all of them, and the local and global community at large is really inspiring. There's so many people who you can talk to, and so many people who admire you. And I always think about that when I'm having like a moment of overwhelm, when I feel overwhelmed and stressed out.
So what was like one of your biggest highlights of the tour?
The biggest highlight of the tour. So the name of the tour was Create, Connect, and Inspire. And that's DXC's model, which is that we seek to create activists, we seek to connect activists, and we seek to inspire activists. And the most important and the highlight of the tour was to actually see that come into play after our presentation. And that was when, this amazing group called Deaf Empowerment for Animal Freedom, came up to us and said, like, hey, how can we work together? We really want to reach out to our own community and really empower our own deaf and hard of hearing community and see how we can, do that with your support. And that's literally the presentation that we just did. We want to be able to support and help other activists inspire their own local communities, because change happens when leaders of certain communities take action in their own community, right? Like, for example, it's so much easier for somebody in Salt Lake City, like an amazing organizer, Lorraine Clegg, that I'm sure you know of, or Faith Ching, who's at the sanctuary, or Laura Bellafatone, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, inspire activism than me to just come in and say, hey, I don't live here, but like, you guys should do this. We have leaders in Salt Lake City who are now organizing actions for DXC. And when I saw that, like when we had these conversations with not only DEF, the Deaf Empowerment for Animal Freedom folks, but also activists in Las Vegas and Riverside, it was really inspiring, because I realized, like, here we are talking about the importance of creating, connecting, and inspiring activists, but it's already happening. And, sometimes you end up learning lessons while you're teaching lessons. And that was definitely the highlight.
On a completely not serious note, and it kind of changed the tone a little bit, where was your favorite place to eat on the entire tour?
Oh my goodness. I think you're asking me this because Salt Lake City has the best food ever. City Cakes Cafe, why am I forgetting? Vertical was absolutely amazing. I came home and I said, like, I'm never going to a vegan restaurant in the Bay Area besides like 2 of them, because Salt Lake City like absolutely blew me away. I mean, I had the mac and cheese at City Cakes Cafe and I was just like, what? I did not know such food existed. I mean, it was just incredible. And Lorraine, the organizer in Salt Lake City, she was like, you have to go here. And I'm so thankful, even though I spent a lot of money. It was really great to spend time with people doing, like, eating food at Vertical and City Cakes Cafe and Sage's Cafe, where they actually hosted our presentation. Sage's just had, like, the best food ever. It was absolutely incredible.
I do thoroughly love City Cakes. Yeah, I gotta admit to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where else did you go that had pretty? I mean, there's some pretty decent places in Las Vegas. Like, where else did the tour really hit?
We didn't have too much time to eat at Las Vegas, but we did go to a certain places, which I cannot remember now because we were just like.
Did you get donuts?
Did you get donuts?
Did we get donuts?
Yeah,
we did get donuts in Las Vegas, and they were really good. And I can't remember where they were from because
probably
they were
Ronald's.
Yep. Yes, we did. We went to Ronald's. Yeah, we went to Ronald's, and it was really amazing.
Did you get the Creamfield? You got to get Creamfield. I mean, where the hell else you
Creamfield
get
donuts were really good. I'm not a big fan of donuts, but those were really good. The apple fritters were really good.
Oh God, they are really good. Whenever I go, I always make sure to grab. This is going to sound really bad, like 2 to 3 dozen donut holes just for the drive out of the city, because they're always gone before you leave the city limits.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we did. Literally what we did.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's funny that you all knew of Ronald's, because it's like not like a hot, like a,
It's pretty infamous.
Yeah,
it's a vegan hotspot.
Yeah,
it's definitely
it really
not well known, except for if you're vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where else did you go?
We went to Riverside. We went to Los Angeles. We went to Rancho Cucamonga, which they have Viva La Vegan, which I think is one of the biggest grocery stores, the vegan grocery stores.
I think it is the biggest. Yeah.
It is the biggest. It was huge. It was like a warehouse. It was great. So we did a presentation there. Yeah, we went to Los Angeles, Riverside, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Irvine. And yeah, those are all the cities that we went to.
Okay. I want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer this, but how do you feel about native foods?
I like native foods, but as I said, nothing compares to Salt Lake City's Vertical Cafe. I've like literally never had anything better.
I feel like I must be like super spoiled, because every time I've been to native foods, it's not bad, but it's not
It's not vertical.
It's not vertical. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm telling you, that's what I'm saying. Salt Lake City, you're used to a higher standard. And honestly, people in California are shocked. They're like, what? Salt Lake City has really good vegan food? And I was like, yeah, it's out of this world.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, like, I mean, not putting down native foods at all.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah. But you're right. They're not vertical.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure I'm not being maybe too snobby.
No. You're just used to a higher standard. Sorry, native foods. I still love you.
So I was going to ask, though, so you mentioned that you have all of these connections and organizers within different cities. Is it set up in like with chapters, or how is DXC structured?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have chapters in many different cities, but we also just inspire people. I mean, one of the things that DXC is known for is just, we want to inspire people to take action. There's really, if you want to get involved, like we want to plug people in. So we've had action so far in 70 cities and 17 different countries all over the world. And regardless of whether there's chapters or not, there's people who have done actions with DXC. We do have some solid chapters in certain cities, but otherwise we have organizers who we're in contact with who, may work for other may work with other animal rights groups or just individual grassroots activists who are getting involved. But yeah, we definitely, the way we structure it is by inspiring people to take action in different cities. And we do inspire eventually that they become organizers and develop a strong presence and chapter with DXC in their cities and country.
So do you push for autonomous DXC chapters?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, when you say autonomous, you mean like simply exclusively only DXC? I mean, we always focus
I guess maybe I should word that a little differently. What I mean is like you say, like, here's our set of principles, we'll organize under these principles, and you kind of like on your own, but we're kind of like a family. Oh,
definitely. So we have a global network, and the way we are united is by our organizing principles, which, the first one is total animal liberation. And if people are ever, we definitely encourage people to, the glue that kind of holds us together is the organizing principles, which are total animal liberation, nonviolent direct action, storytelling, importance of community, and the importance of dreaming big. We like to give, one thing that we really focus on is we want to support activists in activism that they're already doing. Mm-hmm. So if the more important part is doing something and doing it as a part of a global larger network. So if, for example, in Columbus, Ohio, if you're like, we want to, if you're an organizer and you're focused on leafletting, that's great. How can we help you do that better? And how can we create a community around it? So we want to support activists in whatever they're doing and plug them into a larger network.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. We're actually butting up against an hour. So, how can people get in contact with you and or DXC and follow your work and get involved with what you're about?
Yes. So one thing I'll say is we have a big action, probably the most important action in DXC's history, coming up on December 7th. It's called Until Every Animal is Free. If you go on Direct Action Everywhere's Facebook page or website, www.directactioneverywhere.com, you can find out on how to get involved. You can email me personally at priya@directactioneverywhere.com or dxc@directactioneverywhere.com. We want to encourage activists all over the world and every city and every corner of everywhere to plug themselves into our network. And we want to support one another in doing the good work we are already doing for animals. So please join us on December 7th, Until Every Animal is Free action. If you want to find out how to get involved, again, just email me or any of the other organizers on Facebook or by email. We would love to have you organize an action in your city, and we can definitely support in organizing and coordinating those actions.
Well, we end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Sure. Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
It was so great to talk to you, Jordan and Jeremy. Again, I'm so happy that we finally got a chance to connect, and let's keep in touch.
Most definitely. And have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, you too. Have a really good weekend, and please don't shove it into my face that you're going to be going to vertical.
I actually am having brunch at city cakes tomorrow, so...
Okay, all right. Okay, well, have the mac and cheese for me and say hello.
Okay, I definitely will.
All right, take
Okay.
care. Bye.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
see ya. Bye.
This week you heard...
Club to Death by Escala.
Right now you're listening to...
Cryogenic Dreams by Future Primitive.
And as always...
Commandantes, which side are you on?
Apparently we've been pronouncing that wrong for a very long time.
Yep. Oh, wow.
I found out why, though. One of the YouTube videos for them, they put the L on the front.
Oh.
And that's where I got it from.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I
sorry
just saw
about
the
that.
album. Yeah,
we-
I saw the album cover and I was like, oh, shit.
If you like any of the music you hear every week, you can always download it via our show notes, and we get a little bit of a kickback if you do. Always remember, after a show, to go subscribe if you haven't, rate and review if you haven't already. It really does help the show. And if you get a chance, take someone else's phone, subscribe on their phone. It's, it's free, doesn't cost them a thing. And you never know. They might actually enjoy it.
And it's not fucked up.
Not at all.
Also, be sure to be our friend on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. We do a lot of things on there that we don't typically do on the show. For example, we recently attended a protest and live streamed it. That kind of stuff. So be sure to go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab, and be our friend.
Fuck shit damn, man.
Fuck shit damn.
Which Side is produced by the Which Side Media Collective.